Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Beckham will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. Again, Jack isn't with me. I think we're making a habit out of this. Hopefully he'll be back soon. But I do have another special guest with me tonight. He is Joe Blewett. He is the host of the Turn on the Jets Filmroom podcast. He hosts that with a former NFL player, Marcus Coleman, who was in the NFL for 11 years. Joe, how are you doing today?
I think you know the answer to that question at this point as a Jets fan. Getting off of work now and watching some Thursday night football has been a little bit ugly, but football season's back, so I'm happy about that. But these first 2 weeks to start off the season for Jets fans right now has been pretty much as brutal as it can get. So
yeah, and you guys suffered a tough loss against Buffalo in Week 1. You guys were winning by 13 heading into the fourth quarter. We obviously got blown out by Tennessee. So obviously this game coming up on Monday Night Football is extremely important to both of our teams. But let's jump into the big news of the day, and that is that Sam Darnold will not be playing on Monday Night Football. He has been diagnosed with mono. They expect him to be out multiple weeks. How did you take that? Because obviously you never want to lose your starting quarterback, but for a quarterback to have mono at the beginning of the NFL season and then to lose him for multiple weeks, it's just an absolute crusher, especially after that Week 1 loss.
yeah, it's like I said, it's about as bad as you can get when you're talking about blowing a lead in the fourth quarter, because of many missed mistakes, from penalties to missed field goals to dropped interceptions to dropped deep balls that could have changed the game. When you lose a heartbreaker like that, and then you look at the Jets, first 6 games where after we play the Browns, who on paper are a very good team. Obviously, they had some issues with discipline and, containing Marcus Mariota, especially towards the end of the game. I believe in the third quarter, it was still pretty close, and then they pulled away from you guys. So we have, your team who, with the Jets corners right now, guarding Jarvis Landry and, Odell Beckham as the top 2 guys with Tremaine Johnson and Roberts, who have been absolutely, nothing other than terrible at this point. And then after we had to go to Foxborough. You get a bye week, so we'll probably be sitting on a bye week in my prediction at 0-3. And then after that bye week, we go to the Eagles. Then we have the Cowboys. Then we have the Patriots again. So losing that first game was a gut punch. And now after that game, having Sam Darnold go down with mono, which is something, I've been a diehard fan for probably, I'm 26, so let's say probably about 13 years. I've really been following every single game of the Jets. That's the first thing I've ever heard of like that from any quarterback ever. It's a very Jetsy thing to happen. I'm not going to blame the kid. You don't know the situation, whether it be whatever, what we all assume, or maybe he's sharing a drink, but it's not like he was being an idiot, riding a dirt bike and broke his leg. But at the same time, our quarterback is out multiple weeks with mono. Like it's absurd. And especially with all these tough games coming up, I know Trevor Siemian is a guy who, in his starts, I believe he's 14-11, so it's not like he's absolutely terrible, but he's definitely not what Darnold is at this point. So it's definitely a heartbreaker, and the Jets are going to have to really get lucky over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, before we touch on Siemian, you guys have quite a few players that did not practice today. C.J. Mosley, Le'Veon Bell, Keenan Williams. Thankfully, Le'Veon Bell's MRI checked out okay, but having all those injuries plus having your quarterback down, especially to a defense whose linebacking core has been decimated already, losing those two, maybe not having those 2 other players on defense. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, not even just that. You look at Avery Williamson too, who, one of the main strengths of the Jets defense going into the year was their front seven, Avery Williamson and Mosley. And not just trying to be a biased Jets fans, I thought they were, at least a top 10, maybe potentially top 5 inside linebacker duo in the league. You lose him in the second preseason game, and losing major players in preseason is always a tough pill to swallow. So you had that injury. You had Quincy Enunwa, who is, a starting receiver. The Jets run primarily 11 personnel, and you're losing one of your starting receivers to another neck issue, which is his, second time in 3 years that he's missing an entire year. This year minus 1 game due to that neck injury. So that's a big injury. Mosley got injured on a play where he actually made a really nice pass deflection on John Brown as he was running in the deep middle hook in that Tampa 2 zone that Gregg Williams typically deploys. So it came back negative, and it seems like Mosley will play, and that's a really important piece. Mosley is one of the top inside linebackers in the game right now, and the Jets, before Mosley left the game, they were shutting the Bills out. Obviously, a few balls bounced their way, and the Bills drove down the Jets' throat a couple of times. They forced some turnovers near that 50-40 yard line where the Bills were about to get into that green zone, as people like to call it. And as soon as Mosley went out, that's when you see the Bills score, a field goal, then a touchdown, and they run game start gashing us with Singletary and Gore and Allen, and you saw the Bills really be able to key in on Jamal Adams and not have to worry about any inside linebackers, because right now, other than Mosley, their inside linebackers are a 5th round rookie who I do like, but let's face the facts, he's still a 5th round rookie, still learning, and then you have Neville Hewitt, who's a decent backup, but he's a backup. There's a reason he's a backup right now, 5-6 years into his career. So having Mosley out would be a huge blow, but it does seem like he's going to play. And then with Le'Veon Bell, they said they were being very precautious. He had some soreness in his shoulder. They took some scans of his shoulder. It came back negative. There was nothing in his shoulder, no tears, no rips, no, it wasn't inflamed, anything like that. So Bell is going to be ready to play, and he even tweeted that he's going to be ready to play, on Monday. So they are battling a few injuries. Those guys should be good, but they said losing your starting receiver, inside linebacker, and losing your starting quarterback is you're hurting a lot right now. And it's only been 1 week into the NFL season, so.
Yeah, and obviously not having Sam Darnold is the key one here. And let's talk about Trevor Siemian. How did he look in the preseason? What do you expect him to bring, and how do you think he'll fit into Adam Gase's offense?
Well, the good thing is, I don't think Trevor Siemian doesn't have the strongest arm, the most lively arm, and Gase's offense, as you can tell by, the Jets' average, Jamison Crowder is like the first receiver in NFL history or somewhere close to it, to have, 14 receptions and only 99 yards. So it's a lot of dump off, timing and rhythm, type of offense. So you have to be more of a smart quarterback than a, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, throw it deep or be able to run the ball type of quarterback, or even Josh Allen or Cam Newton. We can go on and on. So it's a lot about rhythm and timing. And the good thing about it is that Siemian has played under Gase types offenses with the Broncos. So he has some familiarity with it. So it's not like he's a new quarterback coming into the system, so he knows the system. So that is a positive. He's a backup quarterback. I'm not going to, I've watched some film on him. The preseason, it was the same type of thing. There's a lot of dump offs, a lot of checkdowns, a few nice throws, especially in that last game against the Eagles in that 4th preseason game. He was definitely making some nice throws, and he does have, some legs on him. It's not like, I'm not saying he's, Josh Allen, but I'm not saying he's Eli Manning at the same time. He's somewhere in the middle, so he does have some escapability. He can make throws on the run. But there is a reason that he's a backup at this point, and it's a massive downgrade. I know Darnold, especially last time the Browns played the Jets. That might be Browns fans' view of Darnold, but if you were to watch the last 4 games of the season, there was a reason he was the highest rated quarterback in the NFL over those last 4 weeks, and he was lighting it up. He's been lighting up in camp. He lit it up in preseason. This game he struggled, but and there's Jets fans, it's funny, who are out there acting like he needs to step his game up or we're going to go to a different quarterback. Last year, he only played one of the best defenses in the NFL, had a little bit under 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 picks, and had an offensive line that was getting abused the entire game with his playmakers not making plays. So if people are acting like the kid threw 1 touchdown and 5 picks, it's kind of crazy at this point. But So Jets fans have a really, distorted view of Darnold right now. It's kind of crazy. Like I said, people are, how people are, very reactionary and hot takey. After 1 week, especially after the first week in the NFL season. So there's high hopes from him, but obviously he's not on the field. So playing the Browns with their defense and some of the pieces that they have, with a less mobile, less skilled overall quarterback, it's the Jets at this point are going to have to get lucky, in my opinion. And I know that the Browns got blown out at home versus the Titans. The Titans have a good defense and everything like that. They don't have the best offense, but it seemed like more of a fluky game. I know that there's a lot of penalties that screwed you guys, so it's going to be interesting to see if the Browns can clean that up. Obviously, if they're going to get 15, 16, even 14 penalties, maybe the Jets have a chance, because you see teams upset teams that all the time, but we'll have to kind of hope for that as Jets fans right now, because like I said, having Siemian versus Darnold is a big downgrade.
With Trevor Siemian, you mentioned he's not always able to execute that deep ball. He doesn't have the strongest of arms. Do you expect the Browns to stack the box, especially to take away their biggest playmaker, Le'Veon Bell?
Yeah, for sure. It's the way to attack the Jets right now in terms of their offense. Make them beat you deep, especially with Siemian. That's amplified because he's not the best deep ball thrower. So they're going to stack the box. They're going to play in the shallow zones, and they're going to make them beat them with the deep ball and just in general, just passing. Stack the box, take away Le'Veon Bell, because Le'Veon Bell, minus his stats, 3.5 yards per carry, whatever it was, he looked like the old Le'Veon Bell. He's making some just ridiculous plays in the backfield for the Jets. So if you can take that away, and you're going to make Trevor Siemian beat you, that's it's obviously this smarter game plan. So I'm expecting a lot of the Browns biting up in their coverages and making Guy and Siemian throw it over their head, which I don't see happening, to be completely honest. So
you guys have actually two really good wide receivers. Jamison Crowder caught 14 balls last week on 17 targets for 99 yards. Robbie Anderson, I think, is an underrated deep threat. He has 10 touchdowns of 30 yards or more. So your receivers are good, but when you have a backup quarterback with Trevor Siemian, it's definitely going to be different timing and whatnot on Monday night with him.
Yeah, for sure. And even if he doesn't know the offense, just knowing how your receivers are going to react to certain coverages, whether it be, the corners passing off to the safeties and how the receiver is going to react to that or change the route or option routes. There's a lot of option routes in this offense. There's a lot of option routes in NFL offenses. So how do you know how Robbie Anderson is going to react to, a defender playing with heavy inside leverage or heavy outside leverage? Is he going to, get on his toes and then cut inside? There's a bunch of different things with option routes and kind of being on the same page with your receivers. So he doesn't have that timing, with guys like Robbie Anderson, with guys like Jamison Crowder, because when he's playing in camp, he's playing with the backups. He's playing with guys like Josh Bellamy and Gregg Dortch and all the backups who are either on the team, low on the depth chart or on the practice squad or cut at this point. So that's something you have to worry about immensely, as a Jets fan, just the timing between him and the receivers, and just the fact that he hasn't really been playing a ton of football in terms of as a starter. So he hasn't seen a starting defense breathing down his neck in quite a bit. So it's going to be a little bit different than preseason vanilla looks when the Browns are going to be out there throwing trap coverages and brackets and cones and inverted coverages and all these things versus just simply cover 2, cover 3. It's a lot more complex than that as you get into the regular season. So it's definitely, like I said, it's a worry. The Jets are going to try to have to win on the ground and give Siemian short yardage situations and take advantage of guys like Crowder, who you said is an underrated receiver, really good slot guy. Robbie Anderson, he's not the best all around receiver, but in terms of deep threats in the NFL, he's one of the best. He's burned plenty of guys, especially. His stats are deflated a lot of times because he was playing with guys like Josh McCown, who doesn't have a good deep ball. He's playing with guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who doesn't have a good deep ball. There was multiple times last year where he wasn't hit, where he burned guys like Xavier Rhodes. There's multiple plays where he burned AJ Boye and Jalen Ramsey on multiple different plays. So he's a good deep threat. He definitely has some things to work on in his all-around game, especially as a deep threat, to work on attacking the ball more. There was a play last game where he beat the corner and the corner had time to make it up, make up that ground because Darnold underthrew the ball by just a yard. But Anderson, kind of tried to let the ball just fall into a bucket instead of attacking the ball and high pointing the ball, where if he turned around and worked back to the ball, it would have easily been, a pass interference because the receiver the cornerback was running at 100% trying to catch back up to him. So there's little things that he doesn't do. And then the corner, ended up getting the pass deflection there. So he definitely has to develop more, but I agree with you. He's one of the best deep threats, but that might be negated big time because, like I just said, that Siemian doesn't have that connection with him, and he doesn't have the most lively of arms going deep. So it's going to be interesting. You have to hope that a guy like Demaryius Thomas steps up. They just did trade for him from the Patriots, which is odd to see an in-division trade between any teams. This is the first time the Jets and the Patriots have traded since the Patriots actually traded for Bill Belichick. So it is a good thing, though, because Demaryius Thomas is a guy who's familiar with the offense. He's familiar with Trevor Siemian at this point. And he's still a receiver who, he's not what he was when he was 25, 26, 27 years old. He's 31 at this point, but we saw it last year. In the games he played, he was still, very effective with the Texans and with the Broncos. So I think he's going to be a guy for the Jets who's going to get, 600-700 yards this year, a couple of touchdowns. But the best thing about him is that he offers something to this receiving core that they didn't really have. They have that shifty slot guy who can find the soft spots and zones. They have the deep threat, but they don't really have that big body red zone possession type receiver. You could chuck it up to him on 3rd and 6 and he's going to catch it by boxing a guy out and tucking the ball away. So I definitely like that ad. And I like the receiving core, and I like the weapons on this Jets offense. And you look at another weapon that's gone from this game in terms of like injuries and things like that is Chris Herndon, who had 500 yards as a tight end as a rookie, which is a good number. And many people are talking him up when he comes back. He's another guy who's missing for the first 4 games at this point because of a suspension. So the Jets do have some weapons, but the quarterback concerns me, and I don't know if we're gonna get into it, but the offensive line is definitely a big concern as well at this point.
That's a fantastic transition on your part, because that's where we were headed next. You guys acquired Assembly and Khalil during the offseason. Talk about how they fit into this O-line that you mentioned was pretty poor, and talk about how they've tried to piece this together to protect Sam Darnold and move the ball on the ground.
Yeah, so it's an upgrade from last year. Sam Darnold, in terms of how he was throwing the ball last year, he threw the ball from more 3rd and 10 and 4th and 10 situations than any other quarterback in the entire NFL percentage-wise, which is obviously not good for a young quarterback. And then there was multiple games last year too where we played teams like the Bears, and stop me if you really know any of these receivers. We played the Bears with Deontay Burnett, Josh Bellamy, and I believe Jermaine Kersey you probably know, but those are a bunch of backup receivers, and we were playing that team with those receivers and a bad offensive line because they had guys like Jonathan Harrison starting, Spencer Long, who's now on the Bills, James Carpenter, who's a backup for the Falcons for a good reason. So they definitely did upgrade the offensive line. Left guard, I think Clutch Assembly is still in that Pro Bowl level. He was battling some injuries last year, and breaking down his film, he was very, very good in the first 6 or so weeks, and then it was clear he got an injury somewhere around week 7, 8, and then after that, they kind of took away some of his athleticism and physicality, and that's a lot of what he wins with. He doesn't win with technique. It's a lot of just overpowering guys, and that injury took that away from him, so he started to lose a little bit more, but he's definitely a big upgrade. I also think Khalil over a guy in Jonathan Harrison who's a backup is an upgrade. The problem with Khalil is he came in like a month ago, and he's still getting into football shape. He's still getting into the swing of things. He didn't play any preseason games. He only had practices. So the offensive line at this point, hasn't had a lot of continuity, where the entire preseason, the entire training camp, the offensive line played together like 1 or 2 practices. So offensive line is one of the most important positions in terms of continuity and knowing what the guy's going to next to you, because you really have to work in one string as one unit, or the play will just get completely blown up. That showed up, and it's probably one of the worst teams to go against in the NFL in week 1 against the Bills, who I know they don't have a ton of star players on their team. You're talking about how well coached they are. There's a reason they were the number 2 defense in the NFL last year. You have an offensive line who's not very experienced together, and then they play a defense that just executes a ridiculous amount of really efficient gap exchanges and blitzes that just screwed the Jets on many plays. So they struggled week 1. They're a better unit than last year for sure, but they just need more continuity. I think the first, this week and the next couple of weeks, they're going to struggle a little bit, and then by week 5, 6, 7, they're going to start to get into their swing and start to play a lot better. But it doesn't help that in those first weeks, you're playing defensive fronts like the Eagles, the Browns, the Bills. So we're hoping for a step up from last game. or obviously last year I believe. And, in my opinion, they were easily a bottom 10 unit, probably, but definitely bottom 5 in terms of the run game. Where I said Sam Darnold was consistently put behind the sticks. So it is an upgrade, but it just doesn't look like it's a huge upgrade right now because of the continuity that they don't have at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can communicate better, call checks better, call out Mike linebackers, call out blitzes. There's just so many plays where they would slide the wrong way or slide in their gap protection the wrong way, and there would be 3 blitzers versus 2 offensive linemen. So their communication was all out of sync and all out of whack last week. And you pair that with the Bills secondary that Darnold was trying to throw against, and it was just there was a reason that there were so many checkdowns, and the Bills baited the Jets offense last week. Where there was a lot of blitzing, and they knew they would get there because they knew all the offensive line protections, and they knew that they were inexperienced together. They would leave a guy open on that hot read, and then they would just rally and make a tackle. So Sam Darnold would get a completion, but it would only be for 2-3 yards because the Bills knew what he was going to read and knew what he was going to throw. So part of that was the offensive line and not being able to afford the Jets opportunities to take shots on, second and short like teams are, like to frequently do. And he also didn't have the time to drop back, take 5-7 step drops because obviously the defensive line, the defensive front was getting there so quickly. So it is a concern, especially against guys like Garrett that you have on that defensive line, who is a monster in my opinion. So
yeah, this Browns defensive line is extremely talented with Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi, Olivier Vernon leading that front four. How do you think the Jets are going to be able to slow them down? Tennessee last week did a great job of constantly chipping guys, using wide receivers to block to give Marcus Mariota a few extra seconds, and the Titans were able to use a screen game to perfection. You saw that on a 75-yard touchdown pass to Derrick Henry. They also had a couple other chunk plays. But how do you think the Jets offense is going to try to slow down the very talented Browns defensive line?
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle. I'm not going to lie. The Jets tackles at this point are a huge liability. I can imagine that I don't know where they lined up Vernon last week, but if you line him up against our right tackle, as a left defensive end, as a left outside linebacker, he struggles mightily with speed, and I know Vernon's a really athletic guy, so that's a big concern. So, you're gonna have to see more 12 personnel, and if it is 11 personnel, one running back, one tight end, you're gonna have to see that one tight end on Vernon's side and try to chip him. You're gonna have to get rid of the ball quickly. In my opinion, gas out that defense. And if you're not getting rid of the ball quickly, you're going to have to throw extra protection in there. Like I said, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, bringing in extra tackles to block this defensive front. Like you said, especially against a defensive front who's aggressive like the Browns, or I believe they're still aggressive. Obviously, they changed defensive coordinators. You're going to want to throw screens. And in the pass game, play action, get those guys biting up in the second level, and then get complete balls in the intermediate zones behind them. So I think you're going to see some play action. I think you're going to see a lot of screens, like you said, with the that the Titans did. And if none of those things, you have to get rid of the ball quickly, max protection. It's pretty simple. In my opinion, you can't go a lot of empty. You can't go a lot of 10. 11 might even hurt the Jets. So Adam Gase is a big time guy in terms of that empty personnel, 10 personnel, 11 personnel. He doesn't really like to have extra guys in to block. But versus defensive front like this, I don't see guys like Shell, guys like Beachum, and then another guy who's a huge concern for me, especially versus this defensive line, is Brian Winters. He's a player who one snap he'll have a really good snatch and trap and look really good in terms of blocking, whoever it may be, whether it be J.J. Watt. There's multiple guys who he threw to the ground, but then there's another snap where he'll lean with a bad base into a block, shooting both of his hands, locking his hips, and then just getting swiped or clubbed right to the ground and allowing a sack. So he's really inconsistent. And you guys have some really talented and technically sound and fast guys on that defensive line. You don't have a ton of just raw brute strength on that offensive line. On the defensive line, like the guys like the Ravens with Pierce. You guys have a lot of athleticism on that defensive line. Garrett, Sheldon Richardson's obviously a big guy, but he's really just a freak athlete for how big he is. So I'm definitely concerned for those three guys, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Screen game and getting rid of the ball quickly, I think is going to and relying on your linebackers or secondary to tackle a lot, because I don't really think there's a way to just take these defensive linemen on one-on-one for the Jets, offensive front.
They actually did a good job last week of flipping Myles Garrett and Olivier Vernon from left defensive end to right defensive end, and they were back and forth pretty much all game. So both your right tackle or your right tackle is going to have to go up against both those guys this week. And do you think that all the Browns need to do is rush 4 all game, and you would think that they would be okay?
Yeah. Obviously, they're gonna send some exotic type 4-man pressures. They're not going to send a rush straight forward. They might throw some creeper blitzes and things like that are rushing 4 guys just from different spots, basically, in terms of that creeper blitz. So they're going to send guys from different areas. I don't think there's a straight rush. They're going to send gap exchanges and stunts. And with the Jets offensive line that is lacking, talent at a few positions, plus, like I said, they don't have that continuity, it's going to screw with the Jets a lot to be able to pass guys off, to be able to keep your hips square, to take on, loopers and penetrators and know when to pick guys up. It's going to be an issue just from that standpoint. And then even if you don't do that, or, let's say even if you do, whatever situation that you have a guy like Vernon or a guy like Garrett or even Sheldon versus one of these tackles or even Brian Winters, it might be it's a huge concern. So they're not going to send a straight rush like they would, mostly in preseason. I know they might throw out a couple of, more exotic looks in preseason, but not as much as they will, in the regular season. But yeah, it's definitely it's a concern. Rushing 4, whether that be 4 down linemen or two defensive tackles and 2 corners as a defensive ends drop into their hook to curls or straight hook zones or curl to flats. I see a lot of those type of looks. I know Steve Wilks has I believe it's Steve Wilks for you guys, has a lot of different exotic type of looks, and that he did with the Cardinals, even though they're a bad defense. But yeah, it's gonna be a struggle versus a really athletic defensive front that you guys have. It's my biggest concern at this point. It really is. Or actually, I'll call that number 2 biggest concern. Might get to my number 1 later.
You go from the Browns defense, who had Steve Wilks last year. They had Gregg Williams last year, who's now with the New York Jets, and he made some headlines today from Odell Beckham's comments about how he thinks Gregg Williams teaches players to play dirty. He believes that he told the Cleveland media that Browns players that are still here told them 2 years ago when the Browns played the Giants in the preseason to take out Odell. So, you start with those headlines, and what do you think of Gregg Williams' defense so far this season, and what you've seen in the preseason, since you just had a small sample size of last week?
Yeah, it's you guys know it's very exotic in terms of the front 7 and all the gap exchanges and blitzes that they do and dropping certain guys into coverage. I know that was a big problem with you guys last year, not wanting to drop Myles Garrett into coverage as much as he did. So he likes to have guys on his front 7 that are really versatile. I do like that. There are some things with his defense that I don't love. I don't love how much Tampa 2 there is, and he really does show that middle linebacker in that Tampa 2 zone where you'll see the 2 hook to seam, hook to curl linebackers, at a different level, than the deep hook, of that Tampa 2 linebacker, where he'll be an extra 5 yards behind those guys, and it's a really big tip off for cover 2. So there's ways to to attack that defense if it's going to be pre-snap. So there are some things where I think before the defense is before the ball is snapped, the defense is a little bit too predictable, where he shows a lot pre-snap. There's not a lot of changing of leverage and changing of guys where they are and how they are in relation to receivers and tight ends, whatever it may be. It's a lot of just lining up with not a lot of confusion and capping guys and things like that. So that's one thing I don't like about his defense. Some of the other concerns when you're talking about with hitting Odell Beckham, it's entirely possible. I'm not going to be a Jets homer. No, Gregg Williams doesn't do that. We like Gregg Williams. Listen, I think he's a decent defensive coordinator. I think he's a pretty consistent defensive coordinator. There's been a reason he's been, in the NFL for like 30 years or something now. It's been a while. I might have been, overstating that. It might have been 20, 25, whatever it is. He's been in the NFL for a long time, but also a reason he's been bouncing around from team to team to team to team to team for a while and hasn't got a ton of head coaching opportunities. And has been bouncing around as that defensive coordinator. So I think he's a good defensive coordinator. I think a lot of fans know his name, so I think he's excellent. I don't think he's upper echelon. I don't think he's Wade Phillips or Vic Fangio or anybody like that. I think he's somewhere in the middle. He's a good motivator. I don't know if his scheme in terms of the secondary is the best. I like his scheme in terms of the front seven, but I think he's average. Rah type guy, which can do well at some points as long as your guy stays disciplined. And in terms of him saying guys that hit people, I feel like I would be pretty dumb to say no, he doesn't say that because he was one of the guys with the whole Saints Bounty Gate thing. So is he putting money on guys' heads? Okay, injure Odell Beckham and I'll give you $50,000, or however that went down. I was younger type fan at that point, didn't really look into what happened exactly, but I think I'd be foolish to deny that he might tell guys to tackle low or to hit guys after the play or whatever it may be because he's done it in the past. So it's definitely possible. I don't like that play either. The Jets lost that game last week. They missed field goals, they missed interceptions, they missed deep balls that could have been caught by guys like Robbie Anderson. But the worst play of the game was a dirty play that Henry Anderson's a player who has been dirty for a couple of years now, in my opinion. But maybe now it's being kind of exemplified by a guy like Gregg Williams. There's a play where it's 3rd and 10. Josh Allen clearly releases the ball. It's not like Henry Anderson didn't see him. He took 3.5, 4 steps, lowered his shoulder and his helmet into Josh Allen's chest, and he does one of those typical friggin' dumb things where he's like looking around, raising his hands like he had no idea what happened when he clearly took 3, 4 steps. So that's a worry. You don't want to get these penalties and these late hits, especially in the NFL that is as soft as it is nowadays. So I don't like that, and I think I'd be foolish to deny that might be going on behind the scenes. So
you talked about his very predictable defense, and I think one of the biggest gripes of Browns fans last year and the years before that is that the single high safety seemed to play in the parking lot. Is that something that you have problems with as well?
At this point, I don't necessarily at right now because the safety who's playing that role last game had one of his best games of his career, Marcus May, and I think that's been, to be completely honest, a little bit overblown. There's some reasons you could do that. Having full field of vision, obviously, you might be able to get it from 15, 20 yards. But if you want your free safety to squat and be able to read the defense while not backpedaling, having to do two things at once and already be in position to play deep balls in that deep cover 3, or even deep cover 1, it gives him the ability to do so. So safety is almost dropped to that level, especially in cover 3, regardless of the play. So he's kind of taking away that back pedal. I understand it could be a little bit frustrating where maybe they're not involved in the box as much if it is a quick hitter, screen, run, whatever it may be. But it does afford them the opportunity to read the entire offense. Obviously, the closer you are to the offense, does a linebacker versus a lineman, versus a safety you might be cheating up. Which ones can read the offense better? Obviously, the farther you get back, the better you could read. So I think that's what it's used for, and takes away the back pedal. So I don't hate it. I don't love it either. But it's something I see all the time. Gregg Williams, who puts his guy into that angel role, whatever they call it. He's just taking away that backpedal. You don't really see guys backpedal at that point. It's not like they line up 30 yards off and then they're backpedaling to 40, 45 yards off. They're not involved in the play. Marcus May was in that role a few times with the Jets, in this game, and most of his looks did come from cover 2 where he got those picks, but he played well in that role. So I don't hate it, but in terms of being predictable, I think that is a problem a little bit with that as well though. So that could be an issue that I could see it coming up where, that safety's 30 yards deep. Okay. It's going to be cover 3, cover 6, potentially even cover 4 if he's going to shuffle over, to over top of, the number 2, threat as the linebacker matches him, at first. If he goes inside, goes outside, and carries him if he goes vertical to that safety in that cover 4 look, or whatever it may be, zone pattern matching. But so that could be an issue. in terms of knowing the defense before, but in terms of the actual play, the safety, I don't think that's that big of a deal. But in terms of being predictable, it's out there. You heard Odell Beckham say it, I believe it was today or yesterday, where he's like, okay, they're going to run cover 2 against us. You don't want people knowing what coverage you're going to run. Especially Tampa 2, you have that air quotes honey hole between the deep 1/2 safety and the curl, the flat, the cloud corner. You have that weakness in that zone. If you run a lot of sail, flood concepts, 3-level reads to the sideline, that's going to eat up that concept. Also, if you attack the middle of the field where the linebacker is evading from, to take away the deep third, which is the weakness of that cover too. That's another area you can attack. So when the quarterback knows what's going to happen pre-snap, when the offensive coordinators, the offensive play calls for the Browns see the tendencies, offenses and coaches in the NFL are ridiculously persistent and kind of doing their work and studying tendencies, and okay, this is what they run this percentage on 2nd and 6 in this situation at this time in the game. With this, they study everything. Everything is charted, so they know what people are going to do. They have tendencies. It's how a lot of plays are called. So if okay, well, it's 2nd and 6, and Gregg Williams is going to run Tampa 2 75% of the time in this situation, they're going to assume it's Tampa 2. They're going to call Tampa 2 beaters. So that is a problem, and it's been a problem with the Browns. It's going to be a problem with the Jets. It's going to show up more, and it's been a problem throughout his career. So that's definitely one of his biggest weaknesses as a defensive coordinator.
You talked about that honey hole, and there are many different Browns playmakers that they could use to attack that. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, and David Njoku. And Baker has seemed to excel on those seam throws. How big of a mismatch do you think that could be this week, especially if they do call a lot of that Tampa 2?
Yeah, honestly, the Browns receivers, no matter if it's Tampa 2, cover 3 cloud or cover 4 push, whatever the coverage is, I give you a million coverages. I'm worried about the Browns receivers. You look at that receiver room, it's one of the most talented in the NFL. Odell Beckham's a top 5 receiver. I think in terms of talent, he's probably number 3 in the league for me right now. Maybe number 2. I'm taking Hopkins number 1. That's my personal opinion, but there's an argument between Odell. I would probably take Odell too, to be completely honest. If I'm playing anybody, I'm probably a little bit more afraid of Odell than I am versus Julio Jones. But the thing with Odell Beckham is he's a guy who's seen throughout his career you can get in his head a little bit, and it seems like Gregg Williams might be in his head a little bit. So honestly, if you knock him around a little bit, maybe it's a little bit frustrated. So that's one way to take him out of the game. We'll see if they try to do that. But you're just talking about individual matchups, whether it be pattern matching, spot dropping, man coverage, whatever it may be. You look at Jarvis Landry, Odell, Higgins, and then you also is Callaway suspended? I don't know if I feel like I might have heard that Callaway suspended.
Yeah, he's suspended for the first 4 games, so he won't be there Sunday.
Okay, so even minus him, you have 3, and Higgins. From what I've seen when I watched Higgins, I'm not going to watch I act like I watch 16 Browns games a year, because if I watch 16 Browns games a year, broke down Jets film and watch all their games, I would really have to have absolutely no life and no job. But every time I feel like I watch Higgins play, I feel like he's an underrated receiver. I feel like he always gives the Jets problems. So he's a concern. Jarvis Landry's a shifty route runner, really strong physical guy with really good hands. Odell Beckham's a jack of all trades. The Njoku, I think if he's not as huge of a concern for me, to be completely honest. Especially if a guy like C.J. Mosley, who you guys have been experiencing, you've experienced the last 5 years minus this year. He's a very good linebacker. There was some misconception around Jets fans that he's not as good in coverage. He came in the first game as the Jets and dominated in coverage. People are like, oh wow, it's weird that he played in coverage well. It's like he's been doing it his entire career. So I think he can match up with Njoku. And then I also think listen, the Jets, one of their strengths of this defense too is their safeties. Marcus May is a good matchup guy. He's more of a zone guy, but he can match up. And then Jamal Adams is one of the top safeties in the league. So Njoku might be able to beat him for a pass or two, but it's not like he's going to dominate Adams if he's on him. Maybe he can. He'll be limited by Adams. I don't think he'll. Like I said, I don't think he'll dominate. He might get a catch or 2, or 3, or maybe even 4 or 5. But I don't think he's going to be a guy who's going to be that knife. In the Jets side this game. I'm more really concerned about the the receivers. The Jets secondary, mainly just talking about their corners, is one of the weakest in the NFL right now. Tremaine Johnson was solid with the Rams, but he's looked like a former shell of himself. If Odell Beckham or Higgins or Jarvis Landry just show full sprint off of the line of scrimmage, he's gonna open up 10 yards too early, and they're just gonna break back for curls, comebacks, whatever it may be, stops, and just dominate him on those type of plays, any type of crossing route. He's not fast enough to keep up with those guys anymore. And then Darryl Roberts is a solid number 4, number 5. He's our starter right now. Brian Pools, I think he's solid in the slot, but I see you guys attacking the outside of the Jets defense a lot this game.
Obviously we do have a very good running back also in Nick Chubb. If you had to, pick one that you're more worried about, the passing game or the running game, talk about how your defensive line is and then how your run defense is as well.
Yeah, that's the strength of the Jets defense. I'm not overly concerned about any running game, to be completely honest, this year. Teams like the Ravens, who are really exotic because they have a guy like Lamar Jackson who makes it true 11-on-11 football. Teams like the Cowboys have an extremely strong offensive line. Yeah, you might be a little bit concerned about them, but I know that one of the Browns' weaknesses right now is their offensive line, how poor they've been playing, and how poor their talent is at this point. I know Gregg Robinson got ejected early in the game, I believe, for kicking a guy in the head or something like that. So I know that hurt your guys' offensive line, but it's still overall it's not a good offensive line. I think I deserve to say that. I've been hyping up everything of the Browns. Don't get mad at me for saying their offensive line is bad, because I think it's true. So that paired with the Jets front seven right now, which is a major strength of their team. You look at Quinnen Williams, third overall pick in the draft, who was dominant at Alabama. Henry Anderson is a good player. You have Steve McClendon, who's an underrated defensive tackle. Leonard Williams is obviously a good player. You have Jamal Adams in the box frequently. You have C.J. Mosley, who's a really good player all around. So the Jets' strength is stopping that run, and the Jets were shutting out the Bills in that run game, until that fourth quarter when you had Mosley come out, and then you saw a lot of pin and pulls, pin and folds, and sweeps where they would run directly at Adams. And Jamal Adams is a great player in the box, but when you're taking Mitch Morse, pulling center and putting 300 pounds versus 225 pounds, it's going to be hard for Adams to win, especially when he has to, squeeze that run inside because there's nobody to the outside, because the linebackers would, aggressively shoot up and just be, basically taking themselves out of the play. So as long as Mosley doesn't go down, obviously, which, one of your star players going down for any facet of the game is going to weaken whatever strength that used to be or might still be, but make it less of a strength. I don't think the Jets will have a ton of issues with the Browns running game. The Bills have a solid offensive line. I know the Browns are not strong in that facet. So if anything's going to hurt us, it's going to be those receivers on the outside are going to, even if you guys nickel and dime us, you guys can win that way. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. I don't think that's going to happen, because all you need to do is to have Odell, with a double move, and Jermaine Johnson's toast. So that's a huge concern. I think they're going to bracket him. They're going to cone him. They're going to throw multiple defenders his way. They're going to throw traps at him. They're going to do whatever they possibly can to limit him. But yeah, the run game it's not a huge concern.
A lot of Browns fans were really, and me so as well, were really concerned with Eric Kush at right guard last week. But he actually played pretty well. And then you have two really good guys, other guys in the interior with J.C. Treader at center and then Joel Bitonio at left guard. Where we really struggled last week was, dealing with the pass rush on the edge. You mentioned Gregg Robinson got ejected for kicking the defender in the head when he was pushed over. Chris Hubbard had to switch from right tackle to left tackle. They put McCray in at right tackle, a guy that they just picked up from the Packers. So they really struggled on the outside with the two tackle positions last week. How do you see the Jets pass rush being able to focus on those two guys, and are you confident in your edge rushers?
No, it's the Jets have a weird roster right now. If you really look at the construction of the roster, they're really strong on the kind of in the interior and both sides of the ball. With the offensive line, they have if anything, decent right guard, strong left guard, decent center where the tackles are weak. When we look at the defense, they have a really strong defensive line, really strong linebackers, inside linebackers, weak outside, or even when you look into the interior of the defense with the safeties as well, it's all strong interiorly, which is not ways that teams build, offensive lines where, you could get into a whole, deep debate about, left tackle versus right tackle versus center versus left guard versus right guard, depending on scheme, which one's more important. But typically tackles are looked at as more important. The Jets don't have that. And then outside too, where teams usually build, from corner to outside linebacker to maybe defensive line to linebacker. The Jets are built really strong at safety, linebacker, and defensive tackle, interior defensive lineman, but are really weak at cornerback and outside linebacker. Jordan Jenkins is an underrated linebacker, in my opinion. Last week he had a sack fumble. He had a couple of good plays, but he's not Myles Garrett. He's not even Vernon when Vernon's healthy and playing well. And then you look at the other side, we have another guy who's not playing as a starter. Upon the many more who aren't playing because of another suspension, and Brandon Copeland, who is not even a great starter. So you're looking at guys like Frankie Louvu. You're looking at guys like Terrell Basham, Bronson Kafusi, who I'm sure a lot of these names Browns fans have never heard of. And, I think they're okay players, but there's a reason that other fan bases don't know who these guys are. So it kind of works to the Browns' benefit at this point that one of the areas that the Jets could exploit if they had good talent, they don't have good talent at outside linebacker, at outside pass rusher. A lot of their pass rush will come from the interior. And if you're, I know guys like Botonio and I believe it's Shredder that you said are stronger guys and better guys in the interior. So, they might be able to limit the Jets, and they probably will limit the Jets on the inside. But the tackle situation, you're matching up weak tackles against weak outside linebackers. Who's going to win? And maybe the Jets win once or twice, or maybe they don't. But regardless, it's not going to be a situation where the Jets are able to dominate it on the outside against those tackles. So it's definitely something that kind of benefits you. That's not one of the Jets' strengths.
Well, I want to apologize because we talked about 20, 25 minutes, and this has turned into 45 minutes. So before we get you out of here, I want to get your prediction between the Browns and the Jets. I believe last year you correctly predicted that the Browns would win, and that was their first win, and God knows how many days it was. It was like 500-something days, I think it turned out being. So what's your prediction for this game and a final score prediction as well?
Yeah, I believe I did predict that, and it's funny because I remember after that, and we just lost to the Dolphins, and then everyone's saying how, you guys lost to the Browns, all these Dolphins fans, and I don't know if you guys hate Dolphins fans. I don't see any reasons that you would, but if you could, just root against the Dolphins, and it's not going to be hard this year. They're going to suck anyway, but those fans are just awful. And I was kind of like, I predicted this win. The Browns they've been close. There's kind of they had a lot of talent, and they've built it obviously a lot this year. Seeing some of the injuries that the Jets have, their weak corners, outside linebacker, suspended, Chris Herndon gone, a good starting linebacker, a very solid, underrated guy, and Avery Williamson's out. He's a beast in the run game, not great in the pass game. He's not here. He tore his ACL. Darnold being out. Quincy Newell going down for the season now, Demaryius Thomason. They have a lot of injuries. They're dealing with a lot of things right now. You're playing the Browns, who have a lot of talent with a backup quarterback. I know Siemian is 14-11 in his 25 starts, but still, I think the Browns win this game. It's going to be brutal after this loss. Jets fans, Twitter's going to be on fire. 0-2 going into the Patriots, having a bye week, and then going into the Eagles, Cowboys, Patriots again is not a good way to start the season. The Jets, a lot of fans were 3-3. I thought that was ridiculous. I was hoping for 2-6. 2-4 after 6 games, realistically, and I still feel like the Jets could get to 8-8, 9-7 because they have a really easy schedule. But at this point, honestly, if you're telling me the Jets have one win through those first 6 games, I'll take it. I would really take it at this point, which is almost embarrassing. I don't think this is going to be one of their wins. I think the Browns are going to come out, hot and heavy and pissed off after last game. I'm hoping they come out, in my sake, so pissed off they keep messing up and making dumb penalties and blowing assignments and things like that they did last game towards the end. The Jets are able to come away with it, but I just don't see it because of a guy like Trevor Siemian starting. So I'll say 27-17 Browns. The Browns take a 10-point win over the Jets. Like I said, obviously I'm a Jets fan, so I'm never going to root for any other team. We're playing the Jets, but I have a bad feeling, and the season's going to come crashing down before it really even starts because of all these injuries and our friggin' quarterback having mono, which is just one of the most ridiculous things I've ever. If Darnold was playing, maybe I predicted it to be much closer. Maybe even a win. I could see a win because the Browns just did struggle against Marcus Mariota, who I think is a jag at this point. I think he's a bad quarterback. I don't think he's going to be a starter for much longer, to be completely honest, but it's not the case right now. So I'll say 27-17. Jets are walking home 0-2.
Yeah, this is almost a must-win for both teams based on the schedule, even for the Browns coming up, because after this week we have the Rams on Sunday Night Football. We go to Baltimore.
The Ravens, right?
Yep. And then we go to San Francisco on Monday Night Football. Then you have.
Oh, you guys got to beat the Niners though. That's not the Eagles and the Cowboys.
We should, but then we have the Seahawks and then we have the Patriots. So those. The first part of the schedule for both teams is extremely difficult. And
does the second stretch of your schedule get easier? Because after the Patriots, the Week 7, which is their 6th game, they go to Jacksonville, which is kind of like a sketchy game as well. Because listen. That Florida Heat really screws with some teams, and they don't have a good offense. Especially with Foles probably going down for a while. But that defense is scary, so that's a sketchy game. But then we have I think they have the Dolphins twice. They have the Bengals. They have the Raiders. They have a bunch of teams who are a little bit easier after that point. But listen, if you go into Week 8 and you're already 1-6, that's gonna hurt and be hard to bounce back from. So I'm curious if the Browns have an easier bounce after that point.
Yeah, they do. After the Patriots, they go on the road to play Denver. They're at home against Buffalo. Then they have the Steelers, Dolphins, Steelers again, Bengals, Cardinals, Ravens, Bengals. So, depending on how the end division teams shake out, it could be a rough second half of the year, but there's definitely winnable games in there with Denver, Buffalo, Miami, and Arizona as well. You would think they're a lot more talented than Cincinnati. The division games are division games. Sometimes you don't know how this is going to go out, especially against
they're always weird.
Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So, you can make a strong argument that this is a must-win for both teams based on the early part of the schedule, and getting into a groove of things early on in the season is extremely important.
Yeah. As you being a Browns fan, I don't know how much you guys know about the Bills. I do not overlook the Bills. That defense is extremely well coached. If they will exploit any weaknesses you have, like I said, they don't have a bunch of star names, but there's a reason they're the number 2 defense in the league. They are a good team, and Josh Allen and that offense, they might be a team who, listen, you might force them to 4, 3 and outs right in a row, but then they'll hit a deep shot to John Brown, or Josh Allen might scramble for 40 yards. They're kind of a weird team, and I think for you guys. The Steelers right now. The Ravens I think they're overhyped after one game. I like what they're doing on offense, but they lost a lot on defense overall. I know they added Thomas, but they lost Mosley and Smith and Suggs and a bunch of guys. So I think they're a little bit overhyped at this point, especially after that first game where they played a terrible team. And I also think the Steelers are a team, looking at your division, who, listen, they didn't have Bell. Over the last lot of years, you talked about the Steelers, you talked about, Big Ben, Bell, and Brown, and they're missing 2 of those 3 guys, and one of them is now 36, 37, 38, 39 years old, whatever he is, and has a high kind of rate of having interceptions and is turnover prone at sometimes. So I think you guys have a decent shot to win a division. You guys had to make it through these next couple of games, and I think as a Jets fan and just being honest, looking in, I think some of the players need to zip their mouths a little bit. I think they talk a little bit for too much for what they've achieved at this point. But I think they have a ton of talent. And I'm just, I'm just being a negative fan from the team. But I don't know if you'd agree with that, or Browns fans agree with that. There's a little bit too much talking for what they've produced. Like I said, they have talent, but they were 7-9 last year. Let's win some games before we're running mouths and taking shots at the Giants and all this stuff. I don't love that about the Browns, to be completely honest.
I'll correct you only because there's a tie in there that should never happen. It was 7-1, but I think we would rather prefer to tie week 1 last year than what we got on Sunday. I don't think the Browns are going to overlook anybody. The Browns fans, after what happened with Tennessee on Sunday, because that's been going on for the last month, especially after the Taylor Lewan suspension was announced. As soon as that one was announced, and I was guilty of this too, we pretty much chalked that up as a W. And unfortunately, it turned out ugly the other way. How that game was 15-13 with a few minutes left in the third quarter, I'll never know with how many times we shot ourselves in the foot. But there's no way that the Browns fans are going to overlook anybody else the rest of the season. And if they do, we're going to be in major trouble as we move out towards the regular season. As we get on out here, Joe, you want to go ahead and plug everything you got going on at your podcast? I want to say you guys are on YouTube as well, your film room. So go ahead and plug everything you got, and we'll get you on out of here.
Joe RB31. I might have, there might have been 2 people or 3 people listening to this. Like, oh, maybe I'll follow him. And as soon as I talked a little bit of crap about the Browns, people were like, oh, no, screw this guy. So I might have lost anybody I would get followers from, but I don't expect a lot of Browns fans to follow me. But listen, if you want to, if you guys acquire any players from the Jets or who have previously played with the Jets, you can always look up my Twitter. I've done a review on many players I probably even shouldn't have, or wasted my time to this point. So I have plenty of reviews you guys can watch, and even if you just want to watch this game, I know you guys have a lot of film guys and a lot of good podcasts out there in Browns land. But if you want to get a different perspective from a different team, and you want to go on, it's TOJ space film space room on iTunes, and then on YouTube you just have to turn on the Jets film room, and you'll see the green logo and all that. You'll be able to see it. It looks like a film thing, like one of those things you click. And I'll break down the game from both sides. I don't show only positive plays from the Jets. I won't show only negative plays from the Browns. I'll show exactly what I see, good or bad, from either team, and break down the game fairly. So if you want my opinion on it, that'd be great. Like I said, I do the show with a guy who played in the NFL for 11 years, so it's not like I just spout out a lot of crap that doesn't make sense and is a lot of reaches and guesses. I have a guy who knows a little bit about football, along with myself, not to give myself a pat on my own back, but it's definitely, I think, a good show to check out if you want to really know about the X's and O's and things like that, and just get different perspectives. So I'd appreciate any follows, any subscriptions, even any listens. Like I said, even if you listen once a year. The Browns acquired an outside linebacker who played from the Jets last year. Let me see what Joe had to say. Though I'd appreciate any of that, and I appreciate you having me on the show for sure.
Absolutely, and after the game on Monday night, I'm sure you'll be breaking it down on Twitter like you always do, and I would really encourage Browns fans to get that point of view as well, because we'll have Jake Burns on our side that does it, and then we'll have you on your side, so you'll be able to get a full and complete picture of the game on Monday night. It was pretty. I'm pretty tuned in to the AFC East in terms of film breakdowns, because I follow Travis Wingfield, who works for the Locked On Dolphins, and then I also we've had Mark Schofield on, and obviously he's a big Patriots guy. So I got the AFC East pretty much on lockdown in terms of watching film. So I'm very excited for this game on Monday night. Hopefully it's positive for the Browns. I'm sorry, but we'll see how it turns out. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki. You can follow the podcast on Twitter, on Facebook at 1085 Gridiron. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We appreciate it. We're on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. With all that, we're going to get on out of here. I'll let you give a JETS Jets chant, just because at the end I close with Go Browns. So if you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead and do that.
I honestly, at this point, I don't know if I should. One, because I'm on a Browns podcast, and two, I'm not really very prideful of my team. So if I can give a really sad, just JETS Jets, that's all I can really give right now. I'm not too pumped up, to be completely honest. So.
It's acceptable because my mom's a Jets fan. She grew up in Jersey, so it's acceptable to say the premises of where I am right now. So I appreciate.
Oh, there you go.
I appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on, and Browns fans, go Browns.